So here we have Spright, a deck that is terrorizing the format right now, using the level 2 monsters in order to make combos and sick end boards that just lock your opponent out of playing half the time, with different variants such as tri-brigade Spright, runic Spright, live twin Spright, all sorts of different versions. But we're going to look at pure Sprites and the counters to that deck. Some of these counters will also be effective against the other variants, but for now we're looking at one engine at a time. So let's look at the hand traps. Hand traps are great for going second. They're a way to counter your opponent without actually having to have any sort of board presence. So as you can see, DD Crow, beautiful way to counter your Spright engine, alongside Keldo, Kelbeck, and Medora. These four are ways to banish cards from the graveyard, which is notable against Spright Elf, because Spright Elf they usually use to revive cards from the grave, and if you've banished them or shuffled them into the deck, and they're not engraved, you can't keep reviving them to keep that advantage loop going. So your opponent has to get those cards back somehow before they can restart the advantage loop. And if you have that control over them, they're going to have a much weaker end board and you're going to have a much better time trying to deal with them. Effect Veiler and Imperm, they do the same thing, just one's on the main phase, one isn't. Essentially, you're negating your opponent's monster, either the gigantic Spright or the Spright Elf, or if you have an inclination that they might not have any way to get another level 2 out without using like Spright Blue, for example, you can just Imperm or Veiler the Spright Blue, but it's more recommended to Imperm Veiler the extra deck monsters, prioritizing Gigantic because Gigantic is the one that gets them to anything from the deck. Next we have Gamma, for the same reasons of Imperm and Veiler, but it also destroys. And that destruction is really useful because if you're destroying your opponent's monster, you're putting yourself in a position where you're able to get the level 2 off the field or rank 2 off the field, which means if they don't have a way to get another one on the field, they just can't play. Same with Ghost Ogre. Ghost Ogre technically stops Gigantic Spright because Gigantic Spright detaches material as resolution, not at activation. Which means if there's no Xyz monster on the field when Gigantic Spright resolves, he cannot finish resolving the effect. Therefore, Ghost Ogre Chainlink 2, Gigantic Sprites off the field, they do not get their effect, and they lose the rank 2. So if they didn't have another body present, they just are unable to combo because they are unable to summon anything else unless they have the ability in the hand. Ash Blossom, same thing. Hit Gigantic Spright, hit Spright Starter, you are laughing. And that is it for the hand traps. So next up are the board breakers. The board breakers do the same kind of thing in helping you go second. However, they have a different method of doing so by destroying your opponent's field rather than stopping them making it. We also have negation-like effects which will also help do the same kind of thing. So firstly, we have the Kaijus, Lava Golem and Sphere Mode. The reason I suggest these are not a normal Kaiju such as Gameciel is because these tribute 2 monsters instead of 1. And usually, if you only tribute 1, your opponent will still be able to combo off pretty well. Whereas if you tribute 2, you've most likely broken their whole field. And if you tribute 3, yeah, their whole field is gone. There is no field anymore. There's just the Sphere Mode. So yeah, that is just a really strong way to out the field and is something they cannot even respond to. These other ones they can be responded to for the most part, which is something that makes them weaker. And that is why I suggest running the Kaiju-like monsters. Next, Dark Hole Raigeki and Lightning Storm. And even Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, if you actually want to play Kaijus. So these are effects that will just wipe the entire field. If you wipe your opponent's field, they cannot play. The same reasoning as the Kaijus, and they don't have any destruction protection. They do have a spell trap negate, which is why the Kaiju-like effects are better. However, if you bait out that negate and then use the destruction, there's nothing they can do. They've just lost their entire field. Another way that would also work is if you have Called by the Grave, they try and use Spright Elf, Revive Carrot before you do anything. You can just Call by the Grave on the Carrot. There's just ways to stop your opponent from getting the negate in order to just wipe their field with a board breaker like these. Next we have Dark World No More. Monsters cannot respond to this, and just negate all face-up monster effects. Spright is very around its monster effects. It very much focuses on its monster effects to do stuff, and if you've negated the entire field, you can't really do anything. That's the same reason Droplet's really strong here, although you don't always want to be discarding all your cards. However, Droplet, a Dark Ruler, they just shut out your opponent from doing basically anything, because without their effects, they're literally just little monsters sitting on the field. So even though you haven't wiped them off the field, it essentially gets to the same position, because if they can't do anything, you're just free to completely combo off and destroy everything, and maybe even go for an OTK. Next, Super Poly. If you're playing a deck that can run Super Poly, beautiful. You can summon monsters like Mud Dragon of the Swamp, Dragostapelia, all sorts. This card is just insane. No one can respond to it at all. It just says, oh, hi board, goodbye board. Another really interesting card that you can summon is actually a Salamangreat card, I believe. It's the Violet Chimera. If you're playing Salamangreat and you're concerned about it, you can just go into this guy and fuse away their Spright Elf. Or, even better, the Ignistas have an infusion monster which does this even better. Earth Golem Ignista, a Cyberse and a Link monster. Often, the Spright end field will end on an IP Masquerena. And what is IP Masquerena? A Cyberse. So you can link off Cyberse, you can fusion summon away their IP Masquerena for the Cyberse and their Spright Elf for the Link monster. You've taken away 2 of their interactions and you've got a body for it. And it's not a terrible body either, because it gains attack when it attacks the monster special summon from the extra deck. And if you were playing it in a Cyberse deck, you can revive another Cyberse, which you're probably not if you're playing it, but if you are, that's an extra bonus for you. And then finally, Chalice. It's not that good. It's a budget option I put in because, as you can see, all these are SR and UR. It's just a negate for one of their monsters, which isn't the best, but it isn't the worst. Floodgates and level modulation. This is to stop your opponent playing the game, whether it be from stopping them by locking them out of attributes with Goza Match, because they play 2 different attributes mainly, fire and dark. They can't have both if you have this card on the field, so they have to pick one, and that locks out half of their interactions. Next up, we have level modulation, multiple effects such as Stygian Dirge, Mischief of the Gnomes, Predaplant Dragostapelia, and the Ban the Playdon. These all mess around with levels, either reducing the level by 1, aka making them from level 2 to level 1. Another one that reduces it all the way down to level 1, so no matter what level it goes to level 1, aka it won't be level 2 anymore. And the Ban that Playdon means you can't control 2 monsters with the same level. This is really powerful against the Spright deck, because if they cannot summon monsters because they don't have level 2s, or they can't control 2 level 2s, they do not get any effects. Their effects are completely gone. They cannot XC summon, they cannot link summon, they are completely out of the game. These are amazing floodgates going first against the deck. And finally, Deck Dev. Deck Devastation Virus, tribute a dark monster with 2000 more attack, and destroy all monsters with 1500 less attack for 3 turns. As you can probably guess, the Spright cards are very weak, having 1100, 13, 12, 10, 14. They do not have a main deck monster that has 1500 or more attack. So unfortunately, for the Spright player at least, they just lose a lot. And you can just wipe the field with that and then play on yourself and know that if they draw another monster, they're not playing. Anyway, that is the end of this video, so make sure to comment down below any other tips you could think of, or if you have any suggestions for feedback for the video, I'm happy to hear it. And also, if you enjoyed, make sure to hit that subscribe, and I'll see you around. For those of you who might want the summary, here you go. I figured I'll leave this at the end for you. Quick little snippet.